All right. See some folks joining. We're about a minute after our start time, but I will move forward and go ahead and get started. We have a lot of information to cover. So first, I just want to say hello, and I'm so excited and grateful to that you've decided to join me today. There's a great message in store, and you won't regret attending. I'm Katie Branch, and it's an honor to have this opportunity to speak at the Chicago Women in Technology 2021 conference. I'm a wife and a mother, titles that I hold very dear to my heart, but I'm also an IT professional and have been for the past 18 plus years. As a senior manager at Sono, I have the privilege of positively contributing to the career goals of up and coming professionals through our Mainframe Academy. It not only gives me the chance to share the rewarding and lucrative opportunities that come with the career of Mainframe, but also it gives me the chance to truly champion myself as a servant leader and demonstrate care for the whole person and offering a 360 mentorship. I understand that life is not the same for everyone, and doing life can bring us challenges for certain. I grew up in a small town in the Deep South. As a woman of color, I often faced many challenges. Many were the result of good old-fashioned unconscious bias, and sometimes actually conscious bias, right? But I'm a benefit of the doubt kind of gal, so we're going to go with the former on that one. Assumptions regarding my credibility or the lack thereof, overlooking my potential that may have been masked by insecurities I developed from previous encounters of invalidated discouragement. But along the way, I was so fortunate to have come across some of the few that were called to inspire and to uplift and to bring hope. And some of those mentors truly helped propel my passion to help others and to help others recognize their full potential, even when they can't see it for themselves. So much has transpired over the past couple of years in our country and the world for that matter. The pandemic hit like a ton of bricks, significantly changing how we do life. We witnessed re-acknowledgement of racial inequality in our nation and a sincere need for education and understanding and helping to heal from the inside out. In many instances, these impacts have brought us closer together and placed a spotlight on awareness, but there's still work to be done. So I want to jump into it and have a discussion about the IT industry and some of its impact on women, and particularly women of color. So again, thank you for coming out today and sitting and chatting with me. I have a good amount of information to cover, but I'm eager to engage everyone, and there'll be a few polls throughout this talk. I might be able to work in a few questions during the presentation, but if I miss you, no worries. We're going to kind of capture those at the end. I have two awesome folks out there working with me with ANOVA, so they'll help at the end capturing some of those questions, and I'll try and get to those answers. So without further ado, I will start presenting some of the information that I want to share with you guys today. So I'm going to share my screen. All right, there we go. So Sono is working to do its part and consistently take steps to recognize the importance of diversity and inclusion, not only in our business, but to humanity. One of those efforts has been manifested in our Speak Up report. Get to the next slide. So last year, my colleague Lynn Clausen presented at ChiWitCon and spoke with Sonos and spoke about Sonos. Oh, technical difficulties, the one thing we practice over and over, and it still seems to have caught up with us. Well, hopefully you guys can still see me sharing my screen here. And so I'll just try and pick up from where I left off. So while the percentage of keynote speakers who are women of color appears to have jumped from 5% to 14% between 2018 and 2019, the women of color continue to truly be underrepresented. Most of that increase could be attributed to our Next Web 2019 conference, which included about 42 speakers of women of color. So that kind of screwed the numbers. So really, it's really less, in my opinion, than 14%. That drops down to about 9%. So again, that shows you just the true underrepresentation of women at these IT conferences, and particularly, again, women of color. So I'm going to hit my first poll. Let's see what that is. All right. So my first poll, which Ms. Lindsay is going to also put over here in the poll option for us, so you can actually answer it. But it's, are you aware if whether or not, are you aware of whether or not your company has included representation at a tech conference, meaning have they sent anyone to a tech conference, whether virtual or in person? And if so, does your company send an equal number of men and women to these conferences? So let's see if that poll, if we're able to create it. Were you able to create that, Lindsay? Well, if not, you got
check in the polls tab. It should be listed there with options for people to vote on.
Okay. All right. I wasn't seeing it in there, but maybe the audience can see it. So nonetheless, think about that, and we may touch on that as we get further down into the presentation. So women in technology have long been overlooked, is part of the point that we're trying to make here, from unaccommodating speaking equipment to men asking if they were here to hand out swag bags. Women are often unacknowledged, and this is even more of a problem with women of color. Here's a quote for you. So as you see online on my screen, one of the organizers thought I was there to refill coffee. I was actually giving a keynote. So while there's absolutely nothing wrong or nothing degrading about refilling coffee, one must ponder someone's true thoughts behind such assumption. Again, that unconscious bias that, you know, we want to bring to awareness and hope folks think about a little bit more so. So, and Sonos Speak Up reports also reveals about 59% of women of color said they've experienced discrimination at a tech conference, compared to only 40% of white women. 63 of those women believe that it was solely based on race. While none of these stats are acceptable, women of color are faced with both sides of discrimination, impacting self-confidence and overshadowing their purpose at tech conferences. Diversity and inclusion are much more than counting the number of faces regarding people of color or a certain gender at a conference. It means whether or not diverse groups of people feel welcome enough to confidently participate in the conference experience. It also means building a diverse pipeline of talent at every single level, from junior employees to senior executives. Designing conferences to help people succeed at every level, from every background and every point of view, will decide the success of the conference itself. As I shared earlier, I have the pleasure of making a positive difference in the lives of others through the offering of career opportunities that include professional and personal growth. My experiences as a woman of color have enabled me to see the world through a unique lens, in my opinion. At times, I have a clearer picture than some, seeing value in certain attributes of a candidate. Brown skin does not imply a lack of aptitude to excel in IT. Because it's not a typical look found in this career field. For me, it says fresh perspective and deeper insight into how we can build tools that target all customers and increase ultimately our company's bottom line. A single mom does not scream poor attendance or a lack of commitment. For me, it says selflessness, resilience, determination, care, and passion, all characteristics that one should seek in a strong candidate. I take my role very seriously, and I place a conscious effort on seeking out the best talent, which is unequivocally diverse talent. So we're going to jump into a second poll here to get you to keep thinking. So do you believe you have experienced discrimination at a past work-related conference? This may not even be, an elaborate conference, including multiple companies attending. It may be one within your own company. So think about that. So I'm going to jump over into our next slide here and kind of talk a little bit about, speaking of mothers, I just talked about how I feel when encountering a single mom when seeking talent. But only 24% of our survey respondents said they've been at a conference where they saw an on-site nursing room. So I take this kind of personal. As a mother of three that nursed all of her kiddos, it is particularly discouraging to hear this stat, but it's not uncommon whatsoever. I vividly recall being made to feel that I was inconveniencing others by the need to nurse my children, something most women's bodies are naturally given the ability to do if they desired. No one should be overlooked or penalized for something like that. But these are just those small things that are not considered, that we just want to bring to the front and foremost and have folks think about. So representation matters. If women are able to get the most out of their conference experience, how does that help elevate the tech industry? Technology needs women at all levels, their ideas, their thoughts, especially women of color. Women of color going into keynote speeches and conferences have to prove themselves as a person of color and as a female. Women aren't given the luxury to kind of fluff their speeches with jokes and personal anecdotes. Instead, women of color have to prove how smart they are, their qualifications, their legitimate right to be giving that presentation. Only 9% of women of color are given the opportunity to speak at tech conferences, with about 48% of those women attending saying that they feel they have faced discrimination at some point. So that's, a sad statistic. Unconscious bias against women includes the perception that they're less technically skilled or less effective as leaders. Again, for women of color, both racial and gender biases are at play in the social stereotypes that people form without even realizing. It can become detrimental to the confidence and opportunities given to them. 61% of women say their company is more likely to send a man. So again, just another sad stat around unconscious bias that we hope to help empower you and companies to change that. So women, a failure to have representation results in a failure to talk about having more representation in the tech industry. And these missteps make women less likely to want to participate in some conferences, right? It's generally discouraging. Again, representation matters. 56% of the Black and Hispanic women that have had experiences would make them less likely, have had experience that will make them less likely to attend a future conferences. 30% said lack of diversity among speakers was one of the biggest issues, and a staggering 80% of women of color said they were the only woman of color on the panel. Women at all levels are susceptible to discrimination, and those at higher levels may be even more vulnerable to disrespect due to higher exposure and attention. 27% of women said they are afraid to speak up at DEI-related issues, about DEI-related issues at their companies. And 32% say it's because of their fear of retaliation from management. Women at all levels deserve the right to report misconduct. Companies can do more to ensure that their conferences send their female employees to have safe and trusting outlets for reporting misconduct. This is a big one, right? That outlet, having your safe place, knowing that you can contact someone to share that. So I'm going to hit you with my third poll. So have you been treated differently within the technology industry because of race or gender? Think about that. And even the male participants, the male members of the audience, think about that. Have you ever felt that way? And have you even witnessed where a counterpart, a female counterpart, has endured it? Food for thought. So As conferences shift to a hybrid environment with in-person and online, the future of women of color in tech has a wide open opportunity to change for the better. This whole new landscape can mean a brand new start for tech conferences to include more women and more women of color as panelists, as keynote speakers, as well as just professionals looking to further their career. Tech conferences can empower women of color with control options in virtual conferences that mute or exclude those with negative commentaries unrelated to the speech. At in-person conferences by offering female-friendly accommodations, and in hybrid settings by offering speaking opportunities for women of color to show off what they can bring to the table. The new hybrid landscape also eliminates imbalances with who companies are sending to conferences. For example, due to unconscious bias, companies may default to sending more men. Now, with the increase of virtual conferences, an employee that has been left out in the past may have an opportunity to be invited to attend. So, with conferences being online, costs are a bit more affordable, and it's just a little bit more accessible to women, especially women of color. So, these companies have no excuses to avoid diversifying the employees that they send. Driving change. Whether the conference is in virtual or in person, companies hold the most power to drive change in the tech industry and open the doorway for their women of color employees to be successful. The conferences covered in the Speak Up report welcome over 1 million total attendees annually, many from large tech companies. These tech companies can leverage their power to drive change for good. Big or small companies can join forces, lay out clear guidelines for amenities and services specific to women, such as mothers' rooms or childcare stipends, set out representation and etiquette guidelines for virtual events, and enforce consequences by refusing to send employees to conferences that don't meet high representation standards. If a company is really invested in driving change forward, they should want to leverage their power and influence to improve conference experiences for women. Many times, tech conferences conform to design bias because they simply don't realize attendees are affected. Companies can address bias design features such as male design, AV equipment, high podiums, by soliciting feedback from employees and proactively relaying the information back to conference organizers. Through vetting conferences in advance, companies can prepare employees for the conference settings, and organizers might take the hint to do something that needs to be done if multiple people are asking for amenities. A best practice, honestly, would be to designate a DEI resource to collect and share feedback. Companies can look to their home base to ensure they're not failing to default men design features as well. All right. The survey reveals that women who experience or witness sexual harassment and discrimination are often unsure how to report it. Companies should ask conferences to print emergency numbers, important information on the back of ID badges to ensure that people have a safe resource and others recognize etiquette rules. There should be real consequences when there are credible claims of sexual harassment or any other type of discrimination, so action can clearly be taken. All right. I know we're starting to run just a little bit short on time here, but just want to talk about amplifying the woman's voice is a powerful tool, both in person and virtual conferences. Reiterating a good point made by a woman and amplifying or giving credit to her idea can help ensure her voice is heard and, give her idea to the audience so that they can receive that by including strategies such as amplifying voices and different codes of conduct training for conferences and sensitive meetings. Companies can set their women and gender nonconforming people and people of color up for greater success and comfort during these conferences. Let's see here. we're going to wrap this thing up and kind of talk about how companies will not be able to just do what's been done, undo what's been done overnight, right? Unconscious bias and discrimination against women of color isn't a problem that can be solved in a day. But simple actions such as inviting a majority of women of color as keynote speakers, offering female-friendly accommodations, including more women on panels, and ensuring that there are ways to report misconduct and discrimination are all concrete steps tech conferences must take so that women can feel safe and supported. By doing so, more women would be willing to attend and come back to these conferences, leading to innovative ideas being shared, inspiring collaboration and conversation, and paving the way for future generations of young women to feel empowered and proud of their accomplishments. So my last poll here for you guys to think about, on a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 is strongly disagree and 5 is strongly agree, how would you rate the following statement? I feel that my unique background and identity are valued at my company. Think about that. It starts at home and then we spread it abroad. I would like to quote the mantra of the beautiful, young and talented American poet Amanda Gorman. I am the daughter of Black writers who are descended from freedom fighters who broke their chains and changed the world. They call me. You too are descendants of freedom fighters. You too are called to break chains and change the world. One conversation at a time, one person at a time, one tech conference at a time. Minority is defined as a smaller number. While you don't have to have a big voice, while you don't have to be big to have a loud voice, but all the more powerful when the majority steps up and speaks up in support of these worthy efforts. It will take both male and female people across all races and cultures to truly make a difference for the presentation, and especially the future, for the present and especially the future, to cultivate change and embrace gender and race inequality in IT and the world. So that wraps up our presentation. So I want you guys to kind of jump in with any live Q&A. Again, I have some help in the background with that. We want to push some of these questions up. I'll stop sharing my screen here. But again, so excited that you guys decided to join me. I know we only have a few minutes left. Were there any questions out there? Any thoughts?
So I was just going to say there are no missed questions in the chat, so definitely open to new questions. And Katie, would you like to let Tiffany in to ask her question?
Yes, absolutely. Tiffany, are you there?
Yeah, maybe she changed her mind, which is okay.
Okay. You want to add it to the chat, Tiffany?
Katie, I was wondering if you've had any personal experiences at work conferences where you felt any discrimination based on whether being a mom, a woman, or a Black woman?
Absolutely. So I would say one experience that really stood out to me, and it's a little bit outside of a tech conferences, but it was actually a work experience, which I think has similarity there, where even though I held the title of a senior manager, I was not being the credit, I was not recognized at that or given that credibility. There was something that I had produced and it was questioned, and I had a counterpart who produced something very similar, and yet it was not criticized as much. And one of the messages that I've shared with others is never drop to that level, right? As far as sometimes anger and frustration can take over and you feel that, having a voice still is using a voice appropriately, continuing to be professional and displaying the person that you want them to be. But I did confront the issue, share with the appropriate individuals, and it was resolved. The outcome for mine It's not always the same for everyone. So, but that's definitely a personal situation that I encountered.
Thank you for sharing your experience.
Absolutely. Anything else? I know we've kind of run out of time here just a little bit, but I still want to open it up to any potential questions. Again, just want to thank each and every one of you for joining me here today. I hope that you learned something and that you walk away thinking more about what you can do to contribute to the inclusion of women in the IT industry overall. And in specific, I hope this was enlightening in regards to IT conferences. If you hadn't been, make plans to go. All right, Lindsay, does that wrap it up for us?
Yes, thank you so much for presenting today, Katie. It was really great and really awesome to hear how we can improve tech conferences, especially as we are at a tech conference. So thank you so much.
Right. Thank you. Everyone have a blessed week. Thank you for joining.